Takulandirani ku AMTV Malawi kuchimake kwa nkhani zenizeni. Ngati nkhani imeneyo kuno kulibe, dziwani kuti nkhani imeneyo ndi yabodza.
Somebody has spoken something good, you are always challenged. So I'm here challenged as well. But by the end of the day, as somebody from UTM, which is the part of comfort, and to withdraw actually our comfort from the Isaiah 40, which most of you have memorized, and which most Malawians, actually, when they look at the DK, Dalitso Kabambe, is the site of comfort. And he says, comfort, comfort my people, says your Lord, isn't it? So, and this is the message that us as UTM bring to the Malawi nation, that we are lucky, we are privileged to have DK in our team, because we believe that's where Malawians should be looking at as their comfort. Anyway, I don't have that much time, and let me call Honorable Felix Njawala to have at least a few remarks of biography and the policy itself. Welcome, Mr. Njawala.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Is it evening yet? No, it's still afternoon. Good afternoon. Excellency, welcome to this place where we are hosting UTM wing for Unima. My duty this afternoon is to introduce to you who is our speaker this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen who are here, esteemed guests, I've seen Madam Bridget Kabambe, Your Honor, this afternoon for being with us, and also Malawians who are watching from different mediums. Welcome to this public lecture. Excellency, it's an honor to me to introduce you a man whose life has greatly contributed to the transformation of Malawi's economy. A seasoned economist, a policy strategist, and a leader with a proven track record that we can all commend and attest to. And our speaker tonight, you are here not just to challenge us, but also to help us embrace the economic transformation as a generational mandate. Our distinguished students from University of Malawi, our speaker holds a PhD and MSc in Development Economics from Imperial College, London. He holds a BSc in Agricultural Economics from the University of Malawi. And his education and professional experience make him one of the foremost economic minds in Malawi today. His 23-year service in the Malawi government have been marked by an impressive rise through the ranks, holding key positions that shaped national policy. He has served in many different departments. He has been an economist, senior economist, and principal economist in the Ministry of Agriculture for probably 7 years, total of 7 years, yes. He was chief economist in the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development. He was deputy director of economic planning in the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development for a total of 7 years. He was budget director for 4 years in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. He was director of health, planning and policy in the Ministry of Health for 2 years. Not only that, our speaker this afternoon was once Secretary for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation for a period of 2 years. And lastly, he served as a governor of Reserve Bank from 2017 to 2020. And I can attest that his tenure at Reserve Bank as the governor was a defining moment in our country's economic history. Under his leadership, Malawi achieved significant macroeconomic stability with measurable progress in key economic indicators. Like the inflation dropped from 23% in 2016 to a record low of 7.6% in 2019, making the cost of living for many Malawians manageable. Foreign exchange reserve increased from 2.6 months of import cover to over 3.7 months, strengthening the country's ability to sustain imports. The Malawi Kwacha, during his time as governor of the Reserve Bank, remained stable. And when he was being appointed as Reserve Bank governor, exchange rate was at 7.32. And in 4 years, he maintained that exchange rate. When he left in 2020, it was still at 7.32. Not only that, interest rates were reduced from 25% to 12%, making borrowing more affordable and stimulating the private sector growth. GDP growth rebounded from 2.3% in 2016 to over 5% in 2019, setting the stage for economic expansion. This afternoon, as he takes the stage, he will not only share insights from his experience, but also inspire us to take collective action. His lecture, Economic Transformation, a Generational Mandate, is a call to all of us, leaders, entrepreneurs, policymakers, citizens, to take responsibility for shaping Malawi's economic destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, students from Unima, please join me in welcoming the one and only one, Dr. Dalitso Kabambe, Your Excellency.
It's a pleasure coming back to the academic world. Let me recognize the presence of our National Organizing Secretary, recognize the presence of our National Publicity Secretary, and thank you so much for your introductory remarks. Let me recognize the presence of our National Director of Student Affairs, and all our colleagues in the UTM party here present. I take it you are the president, right? Let me recognize the presence of the president of the Unima Union and the rest of your committee members, as well as esteemed students of the most prolific I'm really honored and delighted that this afternoon I can engage with the people that are going to shape the future of our nation. You found yourself in the right place at the right time. When you take NSO statistics, by their age, children which should be in primary school are in primary school, almost 90%. By the time you go to Form 1, only less than half of the children who should be in secondary school are in secondary school. By the time you are attaining your MSCE, only 19% of the youth who should have been attaining MSc at that point in time attained their MSCE. And the statistic goes down further. For those that have diploma and degree, only 6% of the Malawian population holds a diploma and a degree of some sort. You are joining a prestigious club of 6% of Malawians who hold a tertiary level education certificate. What a privilege that you have. And I can also tell you this statistic, unpleasant as it may be, for those of us 20 years and above in Malawi, 75% do not hold any academic qualification. That's who we are as a nation. But I can also say, over 75% of Malawians are below the age of 35. And that gives us a lot of comfort. If only as a nation we were able to train you, our next generation will be a generation of well-qualified and experienced people in this nation. And therefore, you stand at the right time, at the right place. Because we need to have a generation which is different from us. Our generation, for those of us 40 years and above, is exactly where 75% do not hold any academic qualification. No wonder the country only has 1, if not 2, cardiologists. The country has less than 20 oncologists. The country has fewer experts in every profession and field you can talk about. Hence, partly explaining the underdevelopment we are seeing in our nation. Therefore, I wish to encourage you to really work hard so that the generation coming, your generation, when you come into the workforce, we must have sufficient engineers, scientists, and all professions and disciplines available, which should help the development of our nation. Us in UTM are determined. We will be forming government on 16th September this year. And I'm speaking the nation through you. We will be forming government on 16th September this year. And as we form government this year, we want to do an overhaul of our education system in the country. We have not properly and adequately invested in our education system. We will need for once to invest in our education system to turn around these ugly statistics. Our peers around the region, Zimbabwe and many other countries, as the child starts in standard 1, that child is given an opportunity and a privilege of going through the entire education system until they get a degree, master's, and a PhD level. But for that to happen, we need to ensure that we have invested properly so that in terms of access, every Malawian child should have access to primary, secondary, and university education. Not only access, we must improve the quality of education from standard 1 all the way to the first degree, second degree, and the third degrees. We must improve the quality. In order for us to achieve that, we must appropriately and adequately invest in secondary education in this country. Have as many secondary schools as possible. Bring in teachers in secondary school, materials, resource materials, and improve the conditions of many of our secondary schools in this country. The way our students, our learners are fed in secondary school and their welfare, all that has to be improved. Long gone are the days in public universities, some of us, when we were Unima students, nowadays, I always say that for us, we are bribed in our time to be at Unima. We are bribed. Why? As we come to Unima, we'll be given a bed, decent bed. Every single student. As you come to Unima, food will be available for you. You'll be eating sometimes 3-course meals in those days. Very good food. Very good food. Resource materials were there. And an icing on the cake. They would give us book allowance. Each one of us. The book allowance was higher than the fees. To the extent to the extent that when you come on campus, you receive your book allowance, then you are going to pay fees from the book allowance. The money that remains, you would use it to buy your clothes and many other things that you need as a student. We were being bribed to be in the University of Malawi. We enjoyed life to the full. That's not the case with Unima students today. UTM in its manifesto, it's proposing and it's saying it wants to revert back to that old system of managing public universities. For that to happen, we need to put in the right investment in public universities. And that's our pledge to Malawian youth, to Malawian students, that come 16 September going forward, want to reverse. Some students are sleeping in places that you really feel sorry. And for your generation, you come into the university when you are very, very young, 13 years, 14 years, you're already in the university, to start looking for your own accommodation, to the hassle of getting food and being in class on time and everything else. It's unbelievable. And yet, when you finish, there are also no jobs out there. Your fees is higher, conditions living not so good. When you finish, there are no jobs. It doesn't add up. In our time, when I would finish, when I was finishing 1998, I had 4 or 5 jobs ready for me to choose which job I should pick. And that was how good it was in those days. UTM want to make sure that we do a reset of our entire academic system, as we'll be doing resets in many other areas. But for this afternoon, aside from what I've said, we want to look at Malawi now and ask ourselves a question. Have we done right? Are we doing it right? Where has it gone wrong? And what is the challenge of this generation going forward? And that's what has brought us to have this conversation. And I'm having a conversation with the right people, because you are the people who are going to do what I'm proposing this afternoon. The one changing my slides. So I will cover these 3 areas, and then where's the one changing my slides? Quickly. Thank you so much. Maybe you can't see, maybe I should move aside. I don't know. Because you can't see here. I'm blocking you. I think as a nation, we were once colonized. In 1963, we fought for independence. We grabbed it. 1994, we fought to be a democratic society, and we managed it. But 200 years ago, when the colonizers were coming in, they came from a country where they were smoking a lot. They had cigars and pipes. For those of you who have seen old movies, big cigars and pipes. So when they were coming in, they said, we have found a good country, better sales, where we can grow tobacco. 200 years ago. They started growing tobacco, shipping it back where they came from, and selling it and making money. They also saw in those days as a business model, as the people, the rich, the affluent of the day, were smoking big cigars, they would have a cup of tea by their side. A big cigar, a cup of tea. They'll be drinking their tea. And they developed a business model. We shall go to Malawi, grow tobacco for these people, grow sugarcane, make sugar for these people, grow tea so that they can have and continue the affluent lifestyle of a cigarette and a cup of tea. That was the business model the settlers as they were coming to Malawi 200 years ago decided. That's the business model. And then they said, for the people that are working in our tea estates, people that are working in our sugar plantations, people that are working in our tobacco farms, we will give them maize to eat. So let them eat maize, grow our tea, grow our sugar, grow our tobacco. 200 years. That was a business model that established Malawi. 200 years down the line, Malawians still think, believe that the cigars are still there and that people are still drinking tea and that they still have those cups. Today, colleagues, we are sleeping. The world has long thrown away the pipes and cigars. Movies of today, you don't see cigars, you don't see pipes. Those things are long gone. The time of drinking tea is long gone. There's diabetes today. The health experts have known that tea, when you combine tea and sugar, both of them, they create health problems. They are health hazards, including here in Malawi. We have thrown aside the cup of tea. It's no longer there. But as Malawi, we remain permanently glued to the ideology and the business model that worked 200 years ago. How bizarre is that? To me, University of Malawi was established in 1965. And for over 60 years, it has been training people, including myself, my wife, our NPS, our National Organizing Secretary. We have failed this nation. We should have known that the business model should have changed. But as a country, today we still rely on tobacco. Today we still must eat nsima. The thing that we were told 200 years ago. Kids that are growing up today, they will tell you, I don't like nsima. I don't want nsima. We are forcing it on them. That was the food for 200 years ago, not today's food. Today people eat pizza. Today eat people macaroni and other things. That's what the market demands. Not nsima. Even kids are running away from nsima. But although the University of Malawi has trained scientists, experts in various fields, we have failed this nation because we have remained permanently glued to an archaic business model that has no place in a modern society. And that's our biggest challenge and weakness as a nation. Somebody said our brains are programmed to think and do things that were done 200 years, and yet they cannot think new things today. We can't see what the world demands today, and we can't adapt and change ourselves to live to those things that needs to be done. And that's why I'm saying I'm at the right time, at the right pace, because maybe you would be the people that are going to change this nation. Have you heard me? But because of this archaic business model that has outlived its usefulness and value, because we're still glued to that, that's why today we have all these problems. No one wants to buy our tobacco. If they want to buy, they buy it at a very low price. So many countries have put restrictions. They have stopped buying tobacco. And they are just buying it to please us. And once they buy it, they throw it away. It's not necessary, but they must buy something from us because it's a health hazard. As I said about the maize and so forth, no one wants to eat in Sima anymore. So as a result, our economic growth has remained subdued with the challenges. I want to show you the next slide. In any economy, you can dissect an economy into three key sectors. The first sector is an external sector, fiscal sector, and then the real sector. The real sector is the productive sector of the economy. And that's what I'm talking about. I was talking about earlier. Where in our case, our productive sector, we are growing tobacco, tea, sugar, growing maize. And that becomes the bulk of our GDP. And that's what I'm producing. And there are so many policies, agricultural policies, mining policies, tourism policies, and so many other policies that account for the sector. And the sum total of everything that you're doing and producing, that becomes your real sector. But when you look at the real sector and how it has got all these challenges, the fiscal sector is the national budget. The national budget plays a very, very fundamental role in any economy. And I'll also show you how bad our budgeting process has been. I was once budget director, so you can believe me, I would explain it as I go along the way. But that hasn't been properly managed, and I'll explain that. And going on to the external sector, we also have a lot of challenges on the external front. I mean, currently, probably the biggest challenge is that of a valued exchange rate. We've lived episodes of overvalued exchange rate. When we talk about an overvalued exchange rate, those that are studying economics here would understand. Our kwacha, the central bank, comprising of economists from Unima, they would put the exchange rate at 1,700 kwacha when no one is willing to sell you at that price. It's a market failure. In the market, it's about willingness to buy, willingness to supply. You put a rate 1,700, no one is willing to buy you at 1,700. Which school did you go? The same Unima that we know? Or another school? So the market is rejecting you. You have an overvalued exchange. You have overrated your kwacha. And nobody is able to buy you at 1,700. On the parallel market, people are buying at 4,000. They are willing to sell it at that rate and to buy it at that rate. So you have an exchange rate policy that is bizarre. We call that a misaligned exchange rate because no one is willing to buy from you. On the monetary policy as well, a monetary policy, some of you would work in the Reserve Bank, Ministry of Finance and so forth. When we talk about a monetary policy, it's the interest rate of the country. Now, interest rate of the country, at a bare minimum, interest rates must account for inflation at the bare minimum. Because the policy rate, being the interest rate of the country, is the benchmark interest rate for either loaning out of funds or either getting loans yourself. So that's the benchmark interest rate. There is no way you can have a benchmark interest rate that is below inflation. What it means is, as a country, we have currently inflation at 33%. It means as an economy, the loss in value of everything around us and our kwachas is at 33%. So everything is losing value by 33%. Interest rate rewards for investments, for everything in the economy. Now the interest rate that you are rewarding is 26%. When everything else is losing value by 33%. Reserve Bank, please act as if you went to Unima. It's totally bizarre. It's bizarre beyond comprehension. Look, what it means is anyone who has money in the pocket, in the bank, is mad. Because once you keep that money, at every point is losing value by 33%, is being rewarded by 26%. Bizarre. It doesn't make sense. You are insane by keeping the Malawi kwacha. That's what it means. But the insanity is being done by the Reserve Bank of Malawi. Don't make us insane. We are not insane. We are well reasoning Malawi and went to Unima understand these things. And then, that's on the external sector. On the fiscals, our challenge, because we produce very little of tobacco, tea, and sugar, as a result of that, we can't generate sufficient government revenue. So because you can't generate sufficient government revenue, you end up with borrowing. Now, as you continue to borrow, it has got its own repercussions, which I'll also explain along the way. Rampant corruption. Today, when I look at the government or public sector procurement system, the whole of it is a criminal enterprise. You cannot get a contract in government. You cannot be awarded a contract in government without bribing somebody. You must bribe somebody to get something in the public sector. Criminal enterprise. And for you to understand the gravity and extent of corruption in Malawi and the way it has affected our economy, it's just like a bucket of water with a hose. And if you put in water, no matter how much amount of water you put in a bucket which has a hose, the bucket never gets full. So we have a situation where if you want a passport, you must bribe somebody else. A driving license, you must bribe somebody else. You want a COF done quickly, you must bribe somebody else. You want a contract to supply stationery, you must bribe somebody else. You want a contract to build a school block, you must bribe somebody else. A contract to supply food, everything else you have to pay bribes. And for you to know that the corruption is rampant in many public sector society, look at the people that are managing resources in these institutions. You just assess their lifestyle. Do a simple lifestyle audit. What is your salary? How did you come along all this? You find people being appointed ministers today. They have got one car, one house. 4 years down the line, they were getting 3 or 4 million kwacha monthly. 4 years down the line, they have got 100 houses, so many lodges, 80 cars, and everything else. Where did they get these things? That simply shows you that there is rampant and filthy corruption going out there. And some of the people have stolen that money and laundered it, cleaned that money. Money laundering is cleaning money. They have stolen the money and laundered it by buying big farms, buying big plots, lodges. Somebody would tell you I have over 400,000 hectares of land. And they're able to buy seed. They're able to buy fertilizer. How would you do that and achieve that? There's rampant corruption, and that's why the country cannot move forward. But also there's the issue of tribalism. You find it when you come into the workplace. You find that the people that are politically connected are the ones who get lucrative jobs. They will become governors of the Reserve Bank, ministers, they'll become CEOs of whatever, because they are politically connected. They come from where the president comes from. Or they are politically connected to the party that is currently running a government. And that's why you get a job. It's not about merit anymore. It's about who you know, where you come from. With that, you leave out people that are meritorious and pick garbage. And once you pick garbage, it's garbage in, it's garbage out. if I were going to give an example, for Manchester City to come on the helm of the Premier League, they had to relook at their players. Who is good, who is not good. Let's get the best players only. They had to relook at their coaching panel. Let's get the best. It's only when you get the best of the best and you have a proper game plan and system in place, you are assured of a better outcome. You'll be winning every premiership every year. That's what it means. But when you are picking people because they are politically connected to you, you are bringing in garbage, you don't get the result that you have. So, in summary on this slide, I'm saying our condition today, our inability to think, our inability to do the right things for this nation, and our suffering is all because we have been doing the wrong things persistently, and as a result, everybody else has been suffering, and we are all suffering because of the same. I want to show you what I've just explained, the results. This is what we call economic growth, GDP. And I think economists, you have studied how you measure GDP, how you calculate GDP, and so forth. So for those that are not economists in the room, I want to put it simply in this way. GDP is a measure of how much you are growing. Is a measure of how much you are accumulating. Is a measure of how much wealth you are bringing on board. If it is on a household, if you were earning 2,000 a month or 100,000 a month, and then you are moving from 100,000 the following year to 120, to 200,000, 300,000, we can measure your GDP by that progression that your income or your net worth is growing over time. So GDP is as simple as a measure of the growth in your net wealth. Now look at Malawi, the story of Malawi. The story of Malawi is a roller coaster. This child today grows, today doesn't grow. Tomorrow grows, tomorrow doesn't grow. A roller coaster. You go up, you go down. You go up, you go down. You go up. Actually, we've had some strong growths, actually. 1995, we had a 16.7% GDP growth. It means the child grew up. But immediately after that, there was a big harmony which brought you down. We had a complete trough of 10.2% the following year in 1994, a year behind 1994. But similarly to 1991, we had a trough. 1971, we had a strong growth of 16 point something, and I've deliberately put president by president of the Republic of Malawi. Now, when you look at the era, the 30 years period of Dr. Banda, you are ending up with an average of 4.1% growth. So for 30 years, we were growing by 4.1%. It's a child who is failing to grow. For 30 years, we were failing to grow. And that's why that child remains short and stunted. The next 10 years, with His Excellency Dr. Bagiri Mulunzi, at least we jumped from 4.1% over a 10-year period to 4.4%. But still very, very low. We now come to the era of His Excellency, the late Professor Bingwa Mutharika. At least we tried. Our growth in terms of mean was 6.3% that time when I was budget director. And we also had a high growth of 9.8% in 2008, which was at the time, because of the global financial crisis, that was the second fastest growing economy in the world. And then come to the era of His Excellency Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika, growth came down back from 6.3% to 4.2%. That remained the same under the 2 years of His Excellency Dr. Joyce Banda. And then look the situation now with His Excellency Dr. Lazarus McCarthy Chakwera. Our growth Our growth now, our growth now is quite shocking. Our growth now is quite shocking. Our growth now is quite shocking. For a stretch of 5 years now, from 2020 to 2025, our growth has averaged 2%. When population growth is at 2.6%, that what it means is that we are eating into ourselves, because the rate at which you are adding more people in the economy versus the rate at which you are growing economically is lower. So what it means is we are having more people who are, in simple terms, if it were on the table, you started with 10 kids, 10 pieces of chicken. If you are growing at 3% population, and yet you are growing at 2%, we're adding more pieces of chicken. What it means is, at around, you have 13 people on the table, you have 12 pieces of chicken. You are starting fighting. Because when we were 10 people, 10 pieces, everyone will get a piece. But when we have moved to 13 people, because population growth is much higher than chicken growth or economic growth, you are adding 2 pieces, there are 3 more people added. 13 versus 12 pieces. If you add another 3, that will be 16 versus 14 pieces. Add another 3, that is 19 versus 16 pieces. In effect, with the big boy syndrome, we see that no one can take one-on-one. The pieces are getting fewer and fewer. Those are corrupt, big boys, would even want to get more. They would want to make sure that they remain with one, if not get more than one. When the numbers of people have increased and then the pieces of chicken have gone down. So it's scrambling. Those that are corrupt end up getting everything when everyone else is suffering. That's what that means. And that's what is actually happening out there. There are others that are getting filthy rich because they're extracting, getting from everybody. Everyone else is suffering. Mayo. And that suffering is real. Now, I want to show you a picture. This almost explains the same. Let me go to the next one. You see, this is an interesting one. The blue line is the US over the period 1980 to 2019. That's how GDP, nominal GDP, this accumulation of wealth, that's how much it has grown in the US from just under $3 trillion in 1980. Today they are talking about $24 trillion that they produce every year, because they were growing consistently over the period. And that can also be the same with China. So you may have heard that China was Malawi in 1964. So when you look at 1980 there, China's curve, this one, they were more or less like everyone else there. They had very little GDP output. But over a stretch of 40 years, they have surpassed any other economy in the world and became second only to America. This is a boy that has been growing quite strong and taller over the same period, whereas other economies, they haven't done that. And I've put in my dear country, Malawi. That's where we are at 0. We have not moved an inch. We are as short as we should have been. And I'm saying maybe I've compared wrongly Malawi with the US, UK, and others. Let me try to compare Malawi with our peers. And you can see this is the curve for Kenya. Over the same period, Kenya has grown quite rapidly from just under $10 billion annually worth of GDP. They have pushed their GDP to close to $100 billion per year. The same can be said of Ethiopia, the ones that are running Ethiopian Airlines. They have also pushed from the same period almost another $100 billion every year. Malawi, my brother, my dear motherland, we remain at zero over the same period. So whether you compare with rich countries, you compare with our peers, we have not made any progress. And what does it translate to individuals now? To individuals, if I start with this one, in the US in 1980, on average, an American would earn about $10,000 per year. They would live on $10,000 a year in 1980. Today in America, an American, every single American, live on average on $70,000 in a year. The same can be said of British. They were living on $10,000. You can see this curve for the Britons. They are somewhere around $40,000 per year. And this is for South Korea. They are around $20,000 per year. My dear motherland, Malawi, we are at $400 per year. And we have remained at $400 per year and enjoy a child that refuses to grow. And you remain without growing at all. You may say, we are comparing with the rich countries. Even when you compare with our peers, you can see that Mauritius, they have moved from just under $1,000. Now in Mauritius, every Mauritian is worth about $14,000 per capita per year. You can see in Kenya, every Kenyan is just under $1,000 per year. Malawi, we are at 400. We are refusing and failing to grow. Why? We've perpetually relied on maize, tobacco, sugar, and tea. And let's move maybe quickly. I want to talk about this. This is a graph about industrialization. What would normally happen for those of you who have studied history and you have studied how America was industrialized, Europe was industrialized, more recently China industrialized. For many industrialized countries, you can categorize them in 2 or 3 areas. There are those that started with agriculture. So when we start with agriculture, the way we started, if you start with agriculture, when you start producing, selling, and getting returns on your investment, ordinarily, what other countries have done, when they get returns on investment, they would plow back in their agriculture system. What do? If you sell $200 million worth of tobacco, and they get money, they will plow it back in their agriculture system. Mechanizing, for instance, improving mechanization, bringing in proper technologies, maybe so that they can expand this irrigation area under irrigation and so forth. If they do that this year, next year, by a decade, they have completely changed their production system from using a hoe to mechanized, from 1 hectare under irrigation to 1,000 hectares under irrigation, from less fertilizer inputs to using a lot of inputs, correct inputs. And their productivity may have moved from 1 ton per hectare to 10 tons per hectare. So they have improved, they have changed their agriculture system. And as they continue doing that, they come to a point, those are the economies of scale. All right? So they come to a point, marginal rate of returns, you have understood that? They come to a point where if you continue in agriculture, your investment produces lesser and lesser output. And what do? You now take that money and invest in other sectors, like manufacturing, getting other technologies. And that has been the process, the pathway of industrialization. You start with one sector, returns, put it back in the sector, to an optimal level, and use the excess returns to develop your manufacturing, your industrial sector. And that's exactly what the South Africa, US did. They, not long time ago, 20 years ago, agriculture was the main sector, number one, just like in Malawi. But today, what happens is, as you grow other sectors that are more rewarding, those sectors would contribute more to our GDP than the primary sector, which contributes now less. So the US economy, although in terms of production, they are the largest producers of tobacco. I hope you know that. US is the largest producer of tobacco. I hope you know that. Although US is the largest producer of maize, I hope you know that. Although US is the largest producer of sugar, I hope you know that. Largest producer of tobacco, they are the largest producer of everything that is agriculture. China is the largest producer of everything that is agriculture compared to Malawi. Brazil and others, they produce a lot because their technology had improved and they can produce a lot. And although they are producing a lot, their share in their GDP structure is only 1%. But for Malawi, even the little what we're producing is everything to us. And as a result, because the returns, if you take a kg of rice versus a cell phone, are they the same price? Versus a kg of phone, a kg of a cell phone, a kg of rice, are they the same? So when you can produce a lot in agriculture, but the price per kilo is much lower. So although you can produce a lot, the contribution to GDP is only 1%. Whereas by producing so many phones, because each phone has a huge value, the value of manufacturing just shoots up in that particular economy. So other countries have moved a pathway of mining. And that's the story of South Africa, story of Namibia, and story of other countries. Other countries have moved their pathway through tourism. That's the story of Mauritius and others. Others have developed through oil. The Middle East, Dubai, and many other countries. The primary industry that started is that of oil, but eventually, as you continue investing in oil, the other returns, once you reach the optimal level, you invest in the industrialization, and that's how you navigate your way from raw production of materials to being an industrialized economy. And therefore, the GDP of an industrialized economy would look like this. Your primary production will be very little, and yet you will have manufacturing, you will have financial services and so forth, and other services picking up in the economy and accounting for the largest share of that. The same is true with South Africa, where they are partially industrialized. They started with mining, but their mining has gone down. The other sectors have picked up. The same is true with Japan. Japan largely, predominantly started with the manufacturing, and yet their economy is well balanced. To the extent that when you have a challenge with one sector, the other sector will cushion you up. You don't have to worry. You still keep on, everything else being okay. But for our motherland, it's only maize, tobacco, tea, and sugar. And that is who we are. Once this sector is hit by dry spells and everything else catches cold and sneezes, and the economy is down. And for the sake of Malawi, I want to also say this. Look, for over 200 years, we have been mining nutrients from the soil. We have been mining nitrogen. We've been mining phosphorus. Because the crops and the plants, as they grow, we plant them. They will need these minerals. And they mine them. Every year mining. We have reached an extent where our replacement of the minerals in the soil versus our extraction of the minerals through crops, we have extracted more than we have replaced. As a result, agriculture today is no more as productive as it would have been, because the replacement has been much, much slower and very, very little for most fields in the country. So we face a serious challenge that agriculture today can no longer take us forward, including even investments in irrigation. We haven't done much to put much land under irrigation for us to get more from those fields. Similarly, we haven't put a lot of technology to improve our farming. The way we started 200 years ago using a hoe, today we are still using a hoe. Malawians, grow up. Grow up. Start thinking. God gave us this brain to think. And our brain is as good as the brain of anyone else. Ask biologists around. The kinds of cells up there, the way they operate is just like any other American, any other British, any other Chinese. But for whatever reasons, it seems that our brains, they cannot think. They cannot do anything. How on earth can we still remain with a 200-old age model, which is archaic and obsolete? Our farming system still using a hoe up to this day. How? It's bizarre. And that's why I was saying that we have failed this nation. All of us that are aged here, Honorable Njawal, we have failed this, Honorable Sonki, we have failed this nation. Guys, please, use your brain and change this nation for the sake of the future generation. And that's where the topic of this evening is the right one. It's a generational challenge. I want to challenge you. We have failed you. We have failed this nation. We need people who can think and do things completely different. By doing the same things over and over and over, growing tobacco, growing tea, growing sugar, using a hoe, we have not moved an inch. That's what it means here. On the fiscals that I talked about, you know, when you have a house, their income is 100,000 a month. They keep living on 100,000 a month, 100,000 a month. They are failing to grow it. What do they end up doing? When they have more children, they have to go to schools and so forth. They go around borrowing. Because they are just getting 100,000 a month. And they are getting more rent. They need to go to secondary school, university, and everything else. What do? Borrow. So during the era of Dr. Banda, fiscal deficits were as high as 11.5%. There, we were just borrowing. 11.5% of GDP. By 1992, 1994, started to be done, but we went back. And you can see all these are pairs of GDPs. It's you earn 100,000, you go and borrow 100,000. You go and borrow 50,000. So you can easily calculate the percentage of GDPs there. Up to now, we have gone back to the old days of His Excellency, the late Dr. Kamsbanda. And that's how Dr. Chakwera has also performed. 11.4%. Frightening debts and borrowing. Somebody who is just borrow. Obsession of borrowing. Colleagues, if there is someone who just borrow. What is that? What kind of vision are we? As a result of that, you can see this is how our debts levels have been. When we started in 1964, the country had no debt. Our debts was at around 50%. the international threshold for debts, what we call sustainable level, the right level of debt that you can be. Your debt, public debt must, as a percentage of GDP, they must be less than 60%. They need to be less than 60%. So this is the line of an internationally acceptable threshold. But it was only up to 1974. I was born 1973, for those of you who know. Only by the time that I was born, before I was born, that the country had these sustainable debts. But from 1973, the year I was born, our debts have been completely unsustainable. They shot up to around 180% of GDP under His Excellency, the late Dr. Banda. There are people that talk about Malawi's debts, discusses that was what happened at the time. Now, in 1994, when His Excellency Dr. Bagini Musa was taking over government, our debts was high and it remained high. He kept on trying to fight it and do this, do that, to try to fight it. The 10-year period, our debts remained very, very high. The beauty with this period, if you may call it, the reason why University of Malawi was built, the reason why Zomba's hospital was built, M1 was built, and many other infrastructure that Dr. Banda constructed, it was because he was borrowing all this money. He borrowed all this money and used to build University of Malawi, Zomba Hospital, M1 Road, and all the infrastructure that we see in the country. Dr. Banda developed the country out of borrowing. He borrowed in order to do all that. There are people that say His Excellency Dr. Bagiri Munoz did not do much of infrastructure development. I want the nation to know this. He inherited very, very high debts at the time. And he lived trying to manage those debts, shooting up further. So all he did was to manage that I should not accrue more debts. That's what His Excellency Dr. Bagiri Munoz did during his time. As a result, he didn't push up, he didn't have the fiscal space for extra roads, for extra hospitals, for extra schools. That is what happened this time. His Excellency, the late Professor Bingwa Mutharika was a lucky man. Was a lucky man. He was a lucky man. When he came into government that same year, all the debts were forgiven under HIPIC. So, he inherited huge debt, and all of a sudden, all that debt was forgiven. So, it went almost as down as this. All the debts forgiven. During this time, Malawi was paying huge interest payments on debt. During this time, there was no room for doing anything. Immediately, when he inherited government, the money which should have gone to pay for interest payments, World Bank, IMF, and other governments, all that money was now available. He could no longer pay interest payments. So all that money is the one he channeled into infrastructure development. So for those of you who talk about late Professor Bingwa Mutharika did infrastructure development, he was lucky. The money he was supposed to pay for interest payments, he now channeled. I was budget director. I was also the lucky one. I can speak with authority that money, which we should have used to pay interest payments, that was the money we built a road to Ngoma, we built a road to Dowa, built a road to Nchisi, built so many roads and health centers and everything else that we built at that time. But at the same time, he said, I don't have any debts. I can go and borrow. I have room to borrow. International threshold is this one. Let me go and borrow. So he went and borrowed from China and India. brought that debt up to the internationally acceptable threshold. And that money is the one which we built Bingu Stadium from China, Karonga Chitipa Road. We built mast, we built parliament, and many other infrastructure that were done that time. That was the money. But it was also done out of borrowing. You borrow, make ends meet, make Malawians smile, make Malawians happy, go and borrow. And by this time, 2011-2012, we had reached the threshold. So what the two presidents, Her Excellency Dr. Joyce Banda and His Excellency Professor Atutumuka Ndi Maplan, what they did, I was governor at this time. This time I was able to manage so that our debts do not shoot up anymore. The debts should not, because once you shoot the debt up, you have a debt crisis. So to avoid that debt crisis, that debt was managed. And then His Excellency Dr. Lazarus Magathi Jagwera came in. I've just ended at 2021, but this graph should have been here because he has grown the debts back to the old days. He has grown the debts back to the old days. In summary for this graph, we are a nation that is permanently glued to an economy of maize, tobacco, sugar, and tea. We are unable to feed ourselves because we have overmined ourselves. We have not invested in technology and agriculture. We still remain at 1 ton per hectare production as others have moved to 10 tons per hectare. We are as miserable as we are at that level. And for anything that we have done, we only do it out of borrowing. Sadly, even after borrowing in terms of the current administration, even after borrowing, you still steal that money and you still don't move forward. This is the inflation trends. And this explains why Malawians have been suffering, because our inflation has been picking up. Since 1964, our inflation has been picking up. If you are going to take a baseline of it, you will see that inflation has been picking up. It's only up until this time, around 97, that the systems of managing inflation came in. And this is the period for His Excellency Dr. Bingu Mutharika, because inflation was managed at least at 10%. And this also is the time where yours truly, I was governor managing inflation. And since then, inflation has picked up again. I came in there when inflation was there. That's the time I was appointed as governor, and brought it down. That's what he said, to that level. And that was the time that I left the Reserve Bank. Since then, it has been growing, and I think we are somewhere here now. Inflation at 33%. But what it means is, because of our inability to move out of our poverty trap, others have defined it in that way, everyone else is suffering as the population is growing. And that suffering has manifested itself in rising prices of goods and services in the economy. And that has been biting to every Malawian. Because as inflation is picking up, when incomes have remained the same, when people do not have jobs, when salaries are not going up as at the rate that inflation is going up, everybody else has been complaining. And that's what we have as a situation. And then exchange rate volatility, that's something that I talked about. We have had serious challenges of exchange rate volatility. Actually, in 1972, that's an interesting one. This year, when the Maui Kwacha was being introduced, before this year, Malawi was using a pound, a mapes. Do you remember? Have you heard about it? We were using pounds. That was the currency in Malawi. It was pounds. So this was the year that Malawi Kwacha was introduced, the Kwacha. So His Excellency, the late Dr. Banda, said Malawi Kwacha is stronger than a pound. So you had to have 2 pounds to buy 1 kwacha. It was as strong as that. Pound. You have to have 2 pounds to buy 1 kwacha. So it was stronger. But once it was introduced to the market rejected it. They rejected it, and this is the rejection of the market. No, you are crazy, Dr. Banda. Your rate is that one. And immediately afterwards, that's what started the spiral of exchange rate movements and depreciation. Because the kwacha over the same year depreciated 100%. And since then, we have seen depreciation. So the kwacha moved from literally 2 pounds to a kwacha to today where we're talking about 8,000 kwachas to a pound. Bizarre. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's all to do with economic mismanagement and nothing else. And therefore, he said I was hired as governor of the bank 2017 to 2020 here, to 2019 there, when I left May. We maintained the currency value without moving it at all. The desired state of affairs, whilst this is our record, and no one can take away because these are our statistics and our records. Whilst this has been our mischievousness, the desired state in inflation is 2%. Globally, inflation is supposed to be 2%. So that things are not rising up the way they are rising up. And the US, the UK, France, many other countries, they have what is called inflation targeting. You target 2%. So for Malawi, everything we have been doing is mischievousness. We need to have this. And that's what UTM is promising. We come into government, we want to target inflation at 2% so that everything else in the economy is not rising. In the past, when you used to go to the US, to the UK, the price that you would buy a pair of whatever yesterday, 10 years down the line, you will see that the price is almost the same because you have maintained your economy to be a better economy with lower inflation. Interest rates, we started off very well under Camus, but misbehaved. But even after misbehaving, this could have been a better direction. UTM manifesto, we managed to bring it down here. That's the one which he talked about, that I brought down inflation from 24% down to around 10% there. We need to maintain it at around 5 to 7%. That's what we need to achieve. And that's the desired state. Here, exchange rate movements, we need to have a situation where the kwacha is stable. Super stability. That's what we'll achieve. Public debt, we need to bring it down to normal levels of debt. And then we will need to restructure our economy. Because our economy remains vulnerable. If weather patterns fail, if something happens, once agriculture fails, everything else fails. But we now need to restructure our economy where we invest seriously in manufacturing. We invest seriously in mining, tourism, over and above agriculture. If we do that, restructure our economy, then our economy will be more resilient and better placed. A private sector credit where it is growing, and the growth where economic growth is growing. We are looking and admiring a situation. If you invest in mining and have more mines running, invest in manufacturing, literally everything that we're importing, we can do it. By importing technology, maybe expertise year 1 or year 2, and then we can be able to produce that, and then we can be able to grow out of manufacturing. Mining, we can do that. Tourism, we can do that. Combined with agriculture, we can be growing at no less than 50%. For China to be what it is today, when you say it was the same as Malawi in 1960, China was growing every year at 16%. Every year at 16%. So it was like a plane going. 16% every year, 16%. If Malawi grew one time by 16%, we can do it. And if we grow by 16% every year, for the next 40 years, Malawi will be as good as China. This is the generation that can do that. Because you still have 30, 40 years ahead of you. If you do it now, in your lifetime, we can see that. Hence, the title, the theme of this public lecture, it's a generational challenge. What Chinese have done, Singaporeans have done, South Koreans have done, by growing 16% every year, we just replicate in Malawi and do it. We will be like them in the next 2, 3, 4 decades. That's what we want to achieve. And that brings me to the point where I want to run. I know I'm late. I talk a lot. I want to run, and is it a 12-minute presentation? Is it 12 minutes? Can I run it? Just to an icing on the cake. The UTM philosophy, what we are thinking, what we can then do to get this done, and what we want to do beginning September this year.
Osaiwala kupanga subscribe ku channel ya AMTV Malawi.